Welcome, everybody. We are finally back for the next deep dive of Kagurabachi. Today we are covering chapter 92. I have been dying to get into this one. I am unfortunately a little behind the ball with uploading this one. I was out of town, so a little later than I would have liked, but nonetheless, we are here and I'm ready to just dive into this one and really just take a look at it because this chapter is phenomenal. It's action packed. It has some extremely dynamic panels. And I mean, that's just something I think Kagurabachi as a whole does exceptionally well, is its action and the paneling around that action. It just feels extremely dynamic. It's exciting. It just really pulls me in. So without further ado, let's just jump into this chapter. Like I said, it's chapter 92 called The Swordsman. And after reading this chapter, it's an extremely apt title because that's basically all it is we have four swordsmen all going at it. I mean, I don't know if I classify him as a swordsman, but he is wielding a sword in this chapter, and he is amongst three confirmed swords masters, and he's honestly he's holding his own. So we open up the chapter. Previous was, we had Yura and Uraha falling through the ceiling, and we pick up right off of there where Yura's like, "Oh, Hokuto, like, what are you doing here?" And Hokuto immediately is like, "Was that," basically asking, "Is that Uraha?" And he immediately is like, "Oh, you saved him for me, didn't you?" And Yura here says, basically, he was just too strong. Like, I wasn't saving him for you. I most likely would have gotten rid of him if I could have, but he was too powerful. And this is just really interesting from Yura because I think there's just so much we don't know about him, and especially power-wise. He is a bit of a question mark because in certain circumstances, he looks extremely powerful, and then others you're like, oh, well, that doesn't seem like anything too crazy. But I think it's just from the perspective that we just don't have a lot of information on him, and him being the leader of the Hishaku comes with some expectations of strength. And we know he is strong, but he's just a very enigmatic character, which I think is the point. And he always just seems fairly disinterested. Like this whole chapter, we have Natsuki, Uraha, and Hokuto all like getting kind of fired up and getting really into the battle. And then you have Yura, who's just kind of always got this blank look on his face, and he's like, just kind of chilling. So he's interesting, but he at least acknowledges Uraha's abilities. And then we have the reuniting of Uraha and Natsuki. And Uraha's like, "Oh, yeah, it's been a minute, Natsuki." And Natsuki doesn't even acknowledge Uraha, doesn't say hello, doesn't say, "Oh, yeah, you're right, it has been a while." He immediately is like, "Why are you so sluggish?" Like right off the bat, he picked up on Uraha not moving as fast as he usually does. And that prompts Uraha to, basically explain, yeah, previously was under the influence of a person's sorcery that weighed my body down, made it heavy. But he's like, I'm good now. And he's like, what about you? He like takes a shot back at Natsuki, and Natsuki just says, shut up. So they clearly, it's like cats and dogs. We know Natsuki has this chip on his shoulder from Uraha getting recognition, and he's younger than him, and just not getting the respect that he believes he deserves. And I think with this chapter, he does deserve respect. He is extremely competent, very powerful, and he's locked in. So this is where Natsuki actually acknowledges kind of what I talked about in my last chapter review, where Hokuto, the whole chapter, was basically just like playing defense and wasn't really trying very much, but yet was still like dodging, countering, and just not really taking any damage and reacting to everything very adeptly. And even Natsuki calls out like his Hokuto's reaction time, and he's not even trying yet. And this is what I was talking about, is like, I'm like, this is a little scary, because he's just holding his own against Kiri and Natsuki, and he just doesn't, he seems so nonchalant about it. And in manga and anime, when characters are like that, you kind of have to be a little bit scared about when they do choose to actually go all out. And Natsuki even talks to Kiri about it, and he's like, this guy's the tough one, right? And Kiri even acknowledges it and is like, yeah, right, like he is. She points out that his non-dominant arm that he had like choked her with, like blocked her attack and then choked her, she acknowledges how strong that his arm was, and that wasn't even his dominant arm. It was his left arm, and we know his dominant is his right. And she makes the observation that he has spent some time swinging that sword, which we obviously know from his dialogue and his motivations to fight other sword masters. He's trying to test his skills that he has honed to a razor's edge, and he wants to test them in battle to the death with other masters. So we then cut to Uraha basically telling Kiri to take Hakari with her to the Shinichi, or the Magatsumi. And it's funny because Kiri's like, well, I'm the only one who doesn't get payback. Like, these guys, I fought them, like, I'm the one that has to leave and you guys get to stay here and fight them. And basically Natsuki's just like, quit whining, you brat. Like, he's a little bit older. He already acknowledges that Kiri does not show respect to anybody, so it doesn't really bother him that much, but it still does bother him that she does not refer to him in the way of a superior or someone who is older than her. So it is funny because Uraha calls him out as like, dude, you're so rude. I like seeing this interplay and this dynamic amongst the Kamunabi members and obviously the previous Enchanted Blade user. It's just really cool to get more of these character interactions from people within the Kamunabi and this organization, because clearly they all have varying motivations for why they're part of the Kamunabi, but they're ultimately working towards the same goal. And right now, their goal is to stop the Hishaku with whatever their plan is. And they know, and Kiri even knows, that this is what's the most strategic and tactical move, is you got to get Hakari out of there, because he is essentially a linchpin to preventing the Hishaku from gaining the Shinichi, or the Magatsumi. Sorry, I'm kind of like, I'm going to say both, because in the chapters, they still always refer to it as the Shinichi, but I just always think of it as the Magatsumi because that is the actual name of the blade, and we don't refer to any of the other enchanted blades by anything but their name. But, you know, Shinichi just means basically master work, so that's Rokuhira's best blade that he's created, and we know that to be the truth. So anywho, Kiri likes to throw in a little jab at both of them and is like, fine, you old dudes take care of the other old dudes, referring to Hokuto and Yura. And they're not even that much older than her, but everybody apparently is an old dude. And maybe that comes from her relationship with her grandfather, Shirikai, because he is legitimately an old dude. So then this kicks off, you know, the showdown between Natsuki and Uraha and Hokuto and Yura. And Hokuto basically just comes right in and is like, Yoji Uraha, like, it's an honor to meet you. Like, my name's Hokuto. And he's like, I respect the feats that you achieved with the enchanted blade in the Seitei War. And both both Natsuki and Uraha have the reaction of like, okay, like, whatever, dude. Like, this is not the time. But we know that Hokuto has a deep and seemingly genuine respect for other sword masters. So he is just simply being true to himself and his like code, basically. And he talks about he's longed for fighting with his whole body and his spirit. And he immediately says, I'm the one who killed Ibuki Misaka. Ibuki. Which in the previous chapter, he was going to use that to convince Natsuki to fight him so that he could find out where Uraha was. And then now that Uraha is here, he immediately throws that out the window and is like, I'm the one who killed Misaka. He immediately just goes into telling them what his sorcery is, which he confirms is he can create armored dolls and operate them remotely, and then follows it up with, I'm the one who killed Rokuhira Kunishige. And, you know, like, I pierced his heart with my katana. So he's just going right in. And then he even goes further to say, oh yeah, and this guy next to me is Yura. He just immediately is like, this is Yura. And Yura kind of steps in and is like, what are you doing, Hokuto? What is this right now? And he's like, Hokuto's like, hang on, like, I'm almost done. He's like, this guy right here is our leader. And of course, like, he's the one that ordered Rokuhira and Misaka's death. Like, it's him. And he's like, and all of us Hishaku members have pledged allegiance to him, and he is irreplaceable. He's just, and it's hilarious because then he's like, yeah, that pretty much covers it. And he's like, as for sorcery, well, let's say anything goes. So at first I was kind of confused as to why he was explaining all of these things, but he wanted to ensure that Uraha and Natsuki had proper motivation to fight them. So he starts by giving them a personal reason, by acknowledging the fact that he is the one responsible for killing someone important to both of them. So obviously Natsuki's older brother, and then Uraha, that would be Kunishige, was someone who he deeply respected, seemed to be very close, or at least like almost idolize him. Obviously, it was the one who entrusted the Kumayuri to Uraha. So he's just trying to incentivize them on a personal and emotional level. And then on top of it, from a practical and strategic level, he's letting him know, hey, this guy right here is the leader of this whole group. And he's the one that has ordered all of this stuff that has negatively impacted you guys. And he's irreplaceable. Basically saying, like, go ahead, like, get rid of him. This is your opportunity to take him out and me out for your personal grudges. So he's just like really trying to sweeten the pot so that they will come at him with everything they've got. And it just really encapsulates Hokuto's fight. Like, I almost want to call it, he's kind of a psychopath. Like, he truly is only focused on one thing, and that is fighting strong opponents and putting his life on the line. And this, by doing this whole explanation, it just increases the likelihood of that happening. And sure enough, he goes to like draw his blade, and his right arm like from the mid forearm just goes flying. just goes flying. Uraha already came in with the white purity style, chopped his, that's his dominant hand. We know it. It's his dominant hand, gone. And then they're immediately going at it. Hokuto acknowledges that it's the white purity style, and he just lost his dominant hand, which is exceedingly important in sword combat. And he just lost it at the very beginning of this fight, and he is basically just fanboying about how incredible the white purity style is, and Uraha himself. He's more so just excited and like, wow, truly surprised. Natsuki follows up immediately with another attack, but then we have both Hokuto and Yura blocking, but then he activates his sorcery again, Lightning Menace. We see the crackle of the lightning, and then boom, they go flying through the wall. So it seems to me that the Lightning Menace kind of acts in a similar function as Mei did for the Cloud Gouger, where he is basically cloaking himself in the lightning and then using that to amplify his movements. It's a very cool sorcery. That combined with his dual wielding, Natsuki is just proving himself to be a force of nature and a very, very cool member of the Kamunabi. So they go flying through the wall. Headquarters, that dude, Natsuki's little attendant dude, is probably foaming at the mouth, or he probably quit and went home, because if his job was to prevent them from destroying things, he's going to get fired anyway. So, should probably just head on home. They go flying through the walls. They end up in the headquarters third library. And Yura's even talking to Hokuto, and he's like, you really riled them up. And Hokuto says, well, you're welcome. So even from the earlier parts of this chapter and even this small exchange, I do like getting to see, similar to how we see Uraha, Kiri, and Natsuki all interacting on the good guy's side, I do always enjoy seeing, especially for a villain group, the interactions amongst those characters. So seeing Yura and Hokuto basically having this sort of jesting, playful rapport during this fight is just really cool to see. And it gives a little extra dynamic aspect to the Hishaku as a group. But we do get this awesome panel where Hokuto is talking and he's looking like forward, but to the side we have a door, we have like double doors open, and Uraha is just standing right there, and he's got the blade ready to unsheath. And we get a really cool narration talking about Uraha and the fact that he's a fighting prodigy. He attained the white purity style at the young age of 16, which is insane. And you immediately have Hokuto realizing, he's like, it's easy to imagine death in my future, because he's picking up on the vibes and the situation at hand and Uraha's abilities. And he's like, I've got goosebumps all over. But even while he's saying this, he's not showing any concern. It's more of excitement. It reminds me of like a less twisted version of Hisoka from Hunter x Hunter. If any of you have seen or watched the anime or read the manga, Hisoka is just incredibly obsessed with fighting strong opponents. And even when he is suffering damage or in bad situations, it excites him further rather than makes him afraid. And Hokuto reminds me of that, just in a very less creepy clown sort of way. So they're going in. Uraha goes for his attack. Hokuto is actually able to step back in time, and the blade just barely grazes across his nose. And right in that moment, he is able to counterattack with his left hand and sever Uruha's fingers on his own left hand, which holds the scabbard for his sword. And obviously the White Purity style revolves around Iaido and the sheathing and unsheathing of the blade to strike. And so the left hand holding the sheath is actually super important. Because even Hokuto is like, it's a bit shallow, but I got his left hand. And he immediately is like, hey, payback for my right hand. And I mean, that's a good point. He lost it in the very beginning of the fight, but now he has responded and got a little bit of his, got it back in blood. And, with any of these injuries, at least on like the Hishaku side, we've seen several Hishaku members lose limbs previously. We've seen Yura lose a limb or lose his arm in his initial entrance into the story when he revealed himself in front of Chihiro at the Rakuzaichi. He loses his arm. Well, he's got it back. Like, we see him get it back. Hirohiko loses both of his arms, if I'm remembering correctly, after his encounter with Chihiro. He has them back. So I don't think if Hokuto survives this Kaminabi infiltration, I don't think the fact that he lost his arm will mean that it stays that way forever. I think there's a very good chance that he will have his arm back. And even for Uruha, there's a good chance maybe that he'll get his fingers back. Especially if Samura is now back on our side, there's a good chance that he could use Suzaku to heal. If he was able to heal his eyes even years and years later from blinding himself, I would think it doesn't seem like time really is too much of a factor in Suzaku's healing abilities. So maybe he'd be able to heal Uruha's hand. I really hope so, because that seems pretty important to me. But Uruha even immediately recognizes the fact that Hokuto is good. He's like, he backsteps to evade the sword by like the thinnest hair, and the moment that Uruha's blade misses him, he counters, all with great timing. He talks about how good his coordination is, and then he even brings up his proprioception is exceptional, which proprioception is just your ability to understand where your body is and the way your body moves and controlling it. It's all just like very in tune. You see it a lot with, like athletes. Proprioception is extremely important because it ties with your hand-eye coordination, and that's, for fighting, I could only imagine how important that is, because you need to know where you are in relation to your opponent and the distance and maintaining that. And he's just bringing up the fact that Hokuto is exceptionally skilled in that regard. And we've seen that prior, even in the last chapter, with his movements and being able to counter and block at like the precise moments. So Hokuto is just still proving himself to be extremely adept. And in that moment, we had, while Hokuto and Uruha were fighting, Yura and Natsuki were fighting in another part of the library, because then they come together and we have Yura and Uruha basically bump into each other back to back, and they're like, what the heck? Like, hello? And Yura immediately goes for the stab behind him, but he only gets Uruha's cloak because Uruha kind of like ducked and slipped out of it with a great evasion right there. But then Natsuki comes flipping in from the top rope on Hokuto. So they basically just kind of like switched up opponents, which I love that, because it's just imagining this animated like in my head. You can just see the way that the battle is flowing through the library and the way they're kind of like switching opponents as they go. And Natsuki is basically he berates Hokuto, saying like, don't tell me you're satisfied now that Uraha shows up because he's been just sitting in a hot spring, basically turning into a prune this whole time. And Hokuto even realizes, well, it seems like Natsuki wasn't even fighting at his full power yet. But even when he's thinking that, we see Natsuki employ an extremely cool tactic where he throws up his blade into Hokuto's face. So it blocks his vision and distracts him for a second. And then while that's up in the air, Natsuki goes for a low slash and actually manages to cut what looks to be Hokuto's midsection. And Natsuki, even in this moment, is still thinking about Uraha, because he's like, Uraha's initial movements are insanely fast, but he lacks that edge. And he talks about once you master techniques, it tends to stick with you, but there's an edge that is more akin to instinct, where you have split-second judgments, you move like a knife, in that edge, that honed millisecond, like split-second judgment is something that if you are not constantly experiencing, it's something that you lose. And he talks about it's those fine details that are actually what's crucial in a battle between master warriors. So when master warriors fight each other, the assumption already is that they've mastered their respective techniques. And that's not typically the difference maker. The crucial part is that edge, because that is what is going to make the split-second decisions. That's where intuition is going to play a part, because everything is happening so fast that you're almost acting out of just pure instinct. In the finer and more honed that instinct is, like a knife, the more precise you can be, the more lethal you can be. And that's the difference. And Natsuki talks about how he never stopped fighting. Whereas Uraha did after the war and the enchanted blades were reclaimed. It seems like all of the enchanted blade contractors, or the blade wielders, they all basically went into hiding with the Kaminabi. And we know that Uraha was literally just chilling. He was just chilling at the hot springs. Now, like, granted, there was no war for him to be like participating in, but even during that time, he makes it sound like he wasn't training at all. So it's no surprise that Natsuki, who had never stopped all the way throughout the war and even post-war, why he still has that edge. Because he talks about how his edge is sharper than ever. And it seems to be the truth. Because then Natsuki and Hokuto go blasting over the edge of the library, like falling down to a lower level. And Natsuki brings up again, like, all you sword fighter jerks, like, just eat crow. Like, he's like, watch my back, because he is dashing past you. Basically, all of you people that did not recognize me and that got all of the recognition during the Seitei War for wielding enchanted blades, well, now you guys can eat it because I'm dashing past you, because after the war, I never stopped. Which is just really cool, because it just shows his absurd levels of determination. So I really respect him for that. I think, like I kind of talked about in the last chapter, I think for him, he is also, for him to reach the heights that he wants to, I think he is going to have to come to a point where he accepts people like Uraha and chooses to not be so aggressive towards them and a bit softer and recognize that they've put in a lot of effort themselves as well. But, you know, I think that's something further down the road, hopefully, for Natsuki's character. So while they're falling, Natsuki and Hokuto are going down, because we had Yura and Uraha at that point as a matchup, but Yura just hops over the edge once they go over. And he even thinks to himself, like, he apologizes to Hokuto because he wants to take each of them on one at a time to make sure that they can finish them. I'm assuming in his mind, he wants to reduce as much as possible the amount of damage that either him or Hokuto takes, while also being sure to finish off these two very strong opponents. So as they're going down, it looks to me that Yura winds up for a slash. We don't actually see it connect, but then we see later on Natsuki appears to be bleeding. So I think maybe Yura did actually get off an attack on Natsuki's back. I'm not positive about that. You know, let me know below what you guys think kind of happened in that millisecond, because it wasn't really clear to me. But in this moment, Uraha also notices that Natsuki is razor sharp. Like, his edge is honed, it's sharp as can be, and he even thinks to himself, all the time that I was relaxing in those hot baths, like, he was still at it. So even Uraha himself recognizes the fact that what Natsuki is saying is true. He is truly at his peak right now, and he feels the need to step up, basically regain that edge. But it's really interesting too, because then when Uraha shifts his perspective from Natsuki, he shifts it to Yura, and he talks about Yura, and he's like, well, and then there's this beast. He refers to Yura as a beast who's managing to handle Natsuki's attacks like it's nothing. And this is the part that I kind of brought up in the beginning of the video, is that Yura is just an enigma. He still, throughout this entire fight, shows basically no emotion, but he is completely holding his own. And like I said, I don't even think he has... I mean, we've seen him fight barehanded, and then now we're seeing him fight with a sword. And at least from what he said all the way back at the auction to Chihiro, the whole goal is for him to wield the Shinichi. And if this is true, that would imply that he most likely is a master swordsman himself. But he's not like Hokuto, where he's self-identifying as like, this is the most important thing to me, is being a swords master and pursuing that in all of my battles. But every character always recognizes that Yura is extremely strong. Because even when Chihiro fought him back at the auction, Chihiro brings up the fact that Yura he didn't use any sorcery yet, and still we have not seen what Yura's sorcery is. So he's been doing all of this fighting just by reinforcing his body with spirit energy and, you know, fighting in close combat. And he's clearly very adept at that, but he's also very capable on the defensive side, because we've seen that Natsuki has exceptional attack potency, because he's even damaging Hokuto. And Yura has sustained no damage from Natsuki's assault. So I'm super excited to get more on Yura and like his connection with the Sword Saint. There's just some weird stuff going on there, but I think Yura has a lot of potential that we just simply are not privy to yet. And you know what? I'm here for it. But Uraha then comments on Hokuto and saying, basically, he's surmising that everyone there, so Natsuki, Yura, and Hokuto, are all prepared and they're in peak form. except for him. And that is when we get Uraha locking in. Because even Natsuki, as he's going down and he's got Hokuto in front of him and Yura behind him, he senses Uraha basically locking in. And we get this awesome panel of Uraha like standing up on this ledge with his foot up, and it's all just shaded in black. But we've got like this little white line coming out of where his eye is. And the narrator comes in and says, the former prodigy, his skills were honed in battle as he constantly evaded death. His sword's original purpose was the skill of living. But surrounded by master warriors at the brink of death, his instincts came flooding back. So basically, this is war Uraha, because then he dashes forward and he unsheathes the blade with his mouth. Because we know that his left hand, it was all his fingers were severed off, so he can't hold the sheath with that hand. But he literally unsheathes it with his mouth and is able to blitz past Yura, seemingly slicing Yura's midsection and coming down on Hokuto to stab. And Hokuto does manage to block, but he cuts Hokuto's shoulder. And it seems like Natsuki, after he sensed Uraha, somehow like rotated in midair. It's just an awesome panel. Uraha is just going in right now. And they all crash down into this water. I'm assuming it's like a fountain in the middle of the library. And then we get the final panel of the chapter. And it is just, it's fire. It's so cool. It's all four of them standing in a circle, basically, in this fountain. There's books raining down around them along with water droplets, and they're all just bloodied, all just staring at each other. And Hokuto basically just starts laughing, and that's where the chapter ends. But even in this last panel, you have Uraha, Natsuki, and Hokuto all with like this look in their eyes of just the intensity. They're focused, they're locked in. But then again, you have Yura, just like, the saggy eyes, not much of an expression. Honestly, he looks like, I don't even want to be here. So Yura just kind of kills me for a little bit. But this was an amazing chapter filled with incredible action. We're getting to see Uraha really, exhibit his sword skills outside of, his ability with the enchanted blade. Because unfortunately, we never got to see that. So we're seeing Uraha for the first time reconnect with his more, I guess, prime version, if you would, kind of describe it that way, because that was him getting his edge back near the end of this chapter. So it's getting a little bit more of a prime Uraha peak. Obviously, we don't get him with the Kumayuri. That would be assumedly even stronger, which is honestly like really scary to think about. So this chapter was great because honestly, it made everybody involved in this four-way battle, they all looked good. Like they all performed well. They all took damage basically, but they all dished out damage as well. So it was just, I think it was a phenomenal chapter. I don't necessarily know how this is going to end because at least for me, I'd love to hear what you guys think. I don't think any of these characters are going to die. I think there's too much left on the table for a lot of these characters. I mean, Uraha literally just got brought back from the dead, so I just don't see him going out. Natsuki seems getting more information with him and his brother, and just his connection with Uraha, and I don't see him going anywhere. Yura obviously is the leader of the Hishaku and has some importance in the story and maybe even in relation to the Sword Saint. So, I mean, I don't see him going down. The only one that I can see potentially, passing would be Hokuto. But I hope that, just a selfish, reason, I hope not. I know he's a bad guy. I know he's part of the villain group. We should want him to basically disappear. He is responsible for very important characters' demises. But I can't help it. I think he's sweet. I think he's really cool. And honestly, I would like to see him wielding an enchanted blade. That would be very, very, very bad for the good guys. But regardless, I want to see it. Obviously, he wouldn't be able to use his like doll puppet manipulation sorcery anymore. But with his ability with the sword and just reinforcement with his spirit energy, he would clearly, and then having an enchanted blade on top of it, he would be an absolute force to be reckoned with. So that's just my own little selfish request. But regardless, this is the end of chapter 92. If you've made it this far in the video, I greatly appreciate it. I'd love to hear what you guys thought about the chapter. What do you think going forward? Is anybody in this group gonna, kick the bucket? Or is everyone gonna kind of make it out of this? Maybe this gets interrupted by something. Honestly, I'd love to hear from you guys. But I just want to say that I greatly appreciate you. My last Kagurabachi video was my very first deep dive into a chapter, and it was the best performing video so far on my channel, which obviously my channel is super new. But any views, any likes, I greatly appreciate. And just having that really awesome reception for my first Kagurabachi video was phenomenal. And I'm just looking to build more of a great community that's excited, curious, and just looking to enjoy, these different series. Right now I'm covering Kagurabachi and One Piece, but I plan on, talking about a lot of other series as well. So I'm just looking for great people. And again, I appreciate you if you've made it this far, and I am super excited to catch you guys in the next one. So I hope you all have a wonderful day or night wherever you are, and I will see you guys later.